The summer of 2003 was brutal in New York City, with air conditioners working overtime and everyone desperate to escape the heat. I was 25, living alone in a cramped studio on the Lower East Side. My days were split between a boring desk job and long evenings of watching reruns on my ancient TV. It wasn't glamorous, but it was my life. On the night of August 14th, the power went out. One moment I was sitting at my tiny table eating leftover pizza, and the next, darkness swallowed my apartment. At first I thought it was a tripped breaker, but when I looked out the window, the whole block was dark. No neon signs, no streetlights, no glowing windows, just a deep, oppressive void. I grabbed my phone. No signal. Great. The initial hour wasn't so bad. People gathered outside, lighting candles and chatting like it was an impromptu street festival. Someone had a battery-powered radio playing, and I heard faint laughter rising from the crowd below. I thought about joining them, but something kept me inside. Maybe it was laziness, or maybe it was that little voice in my head warning me not to let my guard down. Instead, I sat by the open window, letting the breeze cut through the stifling air. The silence of the city was eerie. New York's constant hum, the traffic, the sirens, the clatter of life, was gone. All I could hear was my own breathing and the occasional murmur from the street. Around 10 p.m., the atmosphere shifted. The laughter outside faded, replaced by scattered arguments and the occasional shout. People weren't smiling anymore. They were nervous. I couldn't blame them. A blackout in New York wasn't just an inconvenience. It was a recipe for chaos. Around midnight, I heard a commotion outside my building. Peeking through the blinds, I saw a group of 3 men standing at the base of the fire escape. They were talking in hushed tones, but their movements were animated, aggressive. One of them gestured toward the upper floors of the building. A chill ran down my spine. I didn't know these guys, but their presence felt wrong. They weren't neighbors. They weren't here to check on anyone. They were casing the building. I ducked away from the window, my heart pounding. My apartment was on the 2nd floor, right above the fire escape. If they decided to climb up, they'd reach me in seconds. I moved quickly, locking the window and wedging a chair under the doorknob for extra security. Then I turned off my flashlight, plunging the apartment into darkness. If they thought the place was empty, they might pass me by. The creak of metal outside shattered that hope. They were on the fire escape. I held my breath, listening as their footsteps grew louder. One of them whispered something, followed by a chuckle. My stomach twisted. These weren't guys looking for a place to crash. They were predators. I scanned the room for a weapon. The heaviest thing I could find was an old cast-iron skillet. Gripping it tightly, I positioned myself in the corner, out of sight from the window. Glass shattered. I jumped, nearly dropping the skillet. A hand reached through the broken pane, fumbling for the latch. Without thinking, I swung hard. The skillet connected with a sickening thud, and the hand withdrew with a curse. "Someone's in there," a voice growled. "Get the door," another replied. Panic surged through me. They weren't giving up. I heard footsteps retreating down the fire escape, then the sound of someone banging on the front door of the building. They were trying to force their way in. I needed to act fast. My apartment was a death trap. One way in, no way out. If they made it inside, I was done for. Quietly, I slipped into the hallway, my flashlight off. The stairwell was pitch black, but I knew the layout well enough to navigate by touch. I descended one flight, avoiding the creaky steps, and crouched by the door to the lobby. From here, I could hear them trying to break down the front door. Wood splintered with each kick, and their voices echoed through the building. "Come on, hurry up!" one of them barked. I wasn't waiting to see if they succeeded. Slipping out the back entrance, I found myself in the alley. The air was thick with humidity, and the city was darker than I'd ever seen it, but at least I was outside. I made my way down the alley, keeping close to the shadows. My plan was simple. Get to the nearest precinct or find a group of people who could help. Strength in numbers, right? But the streets weren't safe. I passed a couple arguing loudly, a man smashing the window of a parked car, and a group of teenagers spray painting a storefront. The blackout had turned Manhattan into a free-for-all. I stuck to the side streets, avoiding trouble as best I could. My heart raced with every shadow, every sound. Were the guys from my building still after me? Or had they moved on to an easier target? After what felt like hours, I stumbled upon a fire station. The place was lit by lanterns, and a few firefighters were handing out water bottles to a small crowd. Relief washed over me as I approached. "Hey," I called out, my voice shaking, "I need help." One of the firefighters turned to me, his face lined with exhaustion. "What's going on?" I told him everything. The men, the break-in, my narrow escape. He listened carefully, then nodded. "You did the right thing getting out of there. Stick around here, you'll be safe with us." I spent the rest of the night at the station, sitting on the curb and sipping warm water. As dawn approached, the city began to stir. The power was still out, but the chaos had calmed. The men who'd targeted my building were long gone, leaving nothing but shattered glass and frayed nerves in their wake. The blackout ended the next evening, but the memory of that night stayed with me. It was a reminder of how quickly things could fall apart, and how far some people would go when the lights went out. This version ensures logical continuity and builds suspense throughout the narrative. Let me know if you'd like further refinements. Hello, my name is Elizabeth. I've thought long and hard about whether to share this. Every time the lights go out, I feel cold sweat covering my body, and my heart pounds as if it's about to burst out of my chest. But maybe you should know what happened to me that night. It was 2021 when Hurricane Ida hit the East Coast. Many were left in complete darkness due to a blackout, and that's when my life turned into a real nightmare. That evening, I was at home, enjoying a rare moment of peace. Outside, heavy rain was pouring down, and I was wrapped in a warm blanket, lazily scrolling through social media. The sound of raindrops beating against the window was almost soothing, drowning out all other noises. It was an ordinary evening, nothing unusual until the lights went out. Suddenly, the room was engulfed in darkness. The phone screen glowed alone, illuminating my hands and part of my face. I realized it was due to a power outage. A downpour like that could easily cause issues. Thinking it was a temporary issue, I stayed on the couch, hoping the electricity would come back soon. About 20 minutes passed, and I noticed my phone battery was almost dead. Only 3% left. Sighing with frustration, I decided to find a flashlight. I knew it was in the kitchen, in the cupboard. I got up from the couch and headed toward the kitchen, lighting my way with the dim glow of the screen. As I reached the kitchen, I suddenly felt someone's gaze on me. Out of the corner of my eye, I caught a movement by the window. Outside, illuminated by a flash of lightning, was the silhouette of a man standing in the pouring rain, looking right at me. My heart pounded so loudly it felt like it echoed through the entire house. Without thinking, I recoiled and rushed to check all the locks. The doors were locked, but I knew I couldn't feel safe. I grabbed my phone and dialed 911 to call the police, but the screen went dead. The battery was completely drained. I was left in complete darkness and absolute silence, surrounded only by the sounds of rain and thunder. The feeling of isolation washed over me like a wave of terror. No connection, no light, only darkness and him, standing somewhere outside. I tried to think fast. A thought of a spare charger flashed through my mind, but I'd have to find it, and I had no time. Suddenly, I heard a loud crack. The sound of breaking glass came from upstairs, from my bedroom. That meant one thing: he had found a way inside. I froze, listening to his footsteps upstairs. I had to act. I knew the house by heart, so I moved almost silently as the intruder wandered through the rooms upstairs. He was looking for something, but I couldn't tell what. The only thing I knew for sure, he was looking for me. Hiding behind the dining table, I tried to calm my breathing. Every sound seemed louder than it was. I heard him coming down the stairs. His steps were getting closer, and I felt panic building up again. Unable to hide any longer, I tiptoed to the pantry and hid there, closing the door behind me. The silence didn't last long. The intruder moved closer and began methodically searching room after room. I could hear him flipping over furniture. I understood that if he found me, I wouldn't have a chance to escape. My hiding spot wasn't safe enough. I saw his flashlight's beam flicker under the door. I held my breath as the light paused in front of the door. He was about to open it, but suddenly, a loud noise, like trash cans being knocked over, sounded outside. The man froze, listening. It gave me a few seconds to think. Realizing this was my chance, I grabbed a metal broom holder standing nearby and prepared myself. When the door swung open, I struck him as hard as I could on the head. He staggered but didn't fall. We struggled. He was stronger, but adrenaline gave me strength. I finally broke free from his grip and ran to the back door. As soon as I got outside, I ran barefoot to the neighbor's house. The rain lashed at my face, and the darkness and fog concealed everything around me. The neighbor's door was locked, and I started pounding with all my might. No one answered, and hope faded with every knock. Almost despairing, I turned and saw him approaching slowly, as if playing with me, preparing for the final fight. I pressed my back against the door. But suddenly, the door opened, and I stumbled inside, illuminated by the neighbor's flashlight. My neighbor, holding a baseball bat, took in the situation in an instant and immediately stepped out to shield me, ready to defend. The intruder abruptly stopped, turned, and ran back into the darkness, disappearing into the noise of the rain. We immediately called the police. The police arrived within minutes, and this time, the sirens sounded like music. The pursuer tried to escape but was caught just a few blocks from my house. Later, I found out that he had been following me for days, that Blackout was his perfect opportunity to make his move. I was exhausted and shaken, but most importantly, alive. This nightmare lasted only half an hour, but it felt endless. Now I know that even in the calmest places, you have to stay alert because evil can creep up when you least expect it. My name is Daniel Harper, a 27-year-old IT specialist. My job in the heart of downtown New York City had its perks: a great view from the 37th floor, state-of-the-art technology, and flexible hours. I often stayed late, enjoying the quiet once everyone else had gone home. That night, though, staying late turned into the worst decision of my life. It was just past 10 p.m., and I was finishing a security patch update for the company's servers. The office was silent, except for the occasional hum of the air conditioning. I was engrossed in my work when everything suddenly went dark. The hum stopped. The monitors blinked off. The entire floor was plunged into pitch-black silence, broken only by the faint red glow of emergency exit signs. "Seriously?" I muttered, pulling my phone out to use its flashlight. A blackout wasn't unusual, but the citywide view outside the window was just as dark. A massive outage. I grabbed my tools and headed toward the server room to check the systems. The dim emergency lights cast eerie shadows on the walls, making the once familiar office feel strange and threatening. The server room was silent. The backup power system, which should have kept critical operations running, was offline. I checked the control panel. It was completely dead. This was more than just a routine power failure. As I tinkered with the control panel, I heard a faint noise in the distance, like a chair scraping against the floor. I paused, my heart skipping a beat. The office was supposed to be empty. "Hello?" I called out, my voice echoing down the hallway. No response. I shook it off, blaming my nerves and the oppressive darkness. I focused on restarting the system, but the feeling of unease lingered. After several failed attempts, I realized the problem wasn't something I could fix from here. I needed to access the main generator on the lower floors. Grabbing my flashlight, I made my way to the stairwell. The stairwell was colder than the office, and the silence was suffocating. My footsteps echoed with each step I took. As I descended, I heard something above me. Footsteps. I froze. They weren't my own. "Is someone there?" I called out, shining my flashlight up the stairs. Nothing, just the shadows dancing in the faint beam of light. I hurried down, my pulse racing. When I reached the 20th floor, I decided to take a break, leaning against the wall to catch my breath. That's when I heard it again, soft, deliberate footsteps, this time closer. My flashlight wavered as I pointed it down the corridor. For a brief moment, I thought I saw movement, something darting out of sight at the edge of the beam. "Hello?" I called again, louder this time. No answer. I quickened my pace, descending further. When I reached the generator room on the 10th floor, I locked the door behind me, breathing heavily. The room was cramped and smelled of oil and metal. I located the generator panel and flipped the main switch. Nothing happened. I checked the circuits, trying to figure out why it wouldn't start. As I worked, I heard a metallic clang from outside the door. Someone was out there. The doorknob twisted violently, rattling as if someone was trying to break in. My heart pounded in my chest as I grabbed a wrench from the tool rack. "Who's there?" I shouted, my voice shaking. The rattling stopped. For several agonizing minutes, I stood frozen, wrench in hand, waiting for the intruder to make their move. but the silence returned, more oppressive than before. I unlocked the door cautiously, peeking out into the hallway. It was empty. Then I heard it, breathing. It was faint, but unmistakable. It was coming from behind me. I spun around, flashlight cutting through the darkness, but there was no one there. My mind raced. Was I imagining things, or was someone playing games with me? I bolted for the stairwell, my footsteps echoing in the darkness. The feeling of being watched was unbearable. As I reached the 5th floor, I caught a glimpse of movement out of the corner of my eye. A figure. They were dressed in black, their face obscured by a hood. They stood perfectly still at the end of the hallway, watching me. My stomach churned with fear. I didn't wait for them to move. I turned and ran. The stairwell felt endless. Every step I took seemed louder, more desperate. Behind me, I could hear their footsteps now, heavy and deliberate. When I reached the lobby, I sprinted toward the glass doors, relief washing over me as I saw the faint glow of emergency lights outside. But my relief was short-lived. The doors wouldn't open. I frantically pulled at them, but they were locked tight. The security system was down, and without power, there was no way out. I turned back, searching for another exit, but the lobby was empty. For a moment, I thought I'd lost them. Then, out of the shadows, the figure emerged. They held something in their hand, a crowbar. "Stay back!" I shouted, brandishing the wrench. My voice was firm, but my hands were trembling. They didn't respond. Instead, they advanced slowly, the crowbar glinting faintly in the dim light. I backed away, my mind racing. There had to be another way out. Then I remembered the maintenance hallway. It led to the underground parking garage. I bolted toward the hallway, my heart pounding. The figure chased after me, their footsteps growing louder with each passing second. I reached the garage, the cool air hitting me like a slap to the face. Rows of cars stood in eerie silence, their glossy surfaces reflecting the faint emergency lights. I weaved between them, trying to lose my pursuer. Finally, I found an exit door leading to the street. To my immense relief, it opened easily. I stumbled outside, gasping for air. The city was still dark, but I didn't care. I ran until I was several blocks away, my legs burning and my lungs aching. When the police arrived, they found no sign of the intruder. The power was restored a few hours later, but I didn't return to the office. To this day, I don't know who or what was in that building with me. But I know one thing for sure. I'll never work late again.